Hi everyone, we're here today at Gosling Sports Park in Welwyn Garden City, and we're at the Monday night session that is run by Welwyn Wheelers, which is the advanced endurance session. Not normally an endurance rider, normally a sprinter, so this is going to be a little bit suffering for me. But what I'm hoping to do is to use my heart rate monitor and my speed sensor, and especially my twin power meter, to give you an idea of what the demands of a session like this are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the session, stick with the groups for as long as I can, probably suffer all sorts of horrible pains and privations, and then afterwards what we're going to do is we're going to have a little look at the data, and we're going to see what we can pull out of it, and we're going to say, if I was doing more endurance stuff and I wanted to get better at it, what could I isolate from that data and what could I focus my training on? Okay, so the first thing we're going to be doing is a warm-up, and the warm-up is called Pairs Above the Blue. It's quite a standard track exercise, and the way it works is we're all riding along in pairs, and every lap or so the front two pairs switch from the front to the back, and we do that for about 10-15 minutes, and then it'll just be 10 or so fast laps on the black to finish off, and I'll probably end up pulling out somewhere through that little fast period. So see how we get on. Here we have the data from the warm-up. So this is just the averages and the totals and the maximums and so on and so forth. And we're not going to get too bogged down into this, but we're just going to have a little look at it for now. So 11 minutes, 6 kilometers, max average speed, 32 kph, 20 miles an hour, maximum power, 815 watts, etc., etc., etc. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look in a little bit more detail at the ride itself. So here we've got a few different metrics. We've got our power file at the top. Can't actually remember what this one is. It's nothing terribly relevant. Here we've got heart rate. Here we've got speed. And then, let me just select that. We go down a little bit. We've got cadence, which as you can see tracks exactly with speed because I'm on a track bike. So what can we see from this? Well, here we've got a bit of a power spike at the start as I try and get on the back of the group, and then we've got a drop off as I decide not to bother, and I'm just going to wait for the next group to come around. A little bit of a push up the banking. Here's me joining on the group, sort of 450, 500 watts, and then we settle in. And one thing to note is that settling in doesn't mean a steady power, it's just these little spikes like that as we're pushing uphill into the banking, coming downhill out the banking. And then this big spike here is actually me changing off the front. I'm pushing off the front and moving up the track, and I'm allowing another rider to come in. So you can see the power goes to 0 as I'm sat at the top of the track, letting the group come underneath me, and then a little bit of a surge as I join back on the back again. These little bumps and spikes, these are just me backing off the power, pushing onto someone's wheel, backing off the power again, some stuff for the geometry of the track. This, I think, is probably another little change. Actually, I don't think that's that. I think that's probably something else. I'm not sure. There's another change, pushing off the front, getting on the back, and then we keep going round and round until I just get a bit fed up at the end. So you can see a couple of features that make this quite an effective warm-up. We've got this sort of ticking along reasonably steadily in the sort of aerobic zone here, a couple of 100 watts, and then we've got a couple of big spikes. And what those are doing is priming my sprint muscles and getting me ready to do a little bit more work, but there's not actually too many of those. And that's the rough structure you want from a warm-up, which is mostly aerobic, couple of little spikes like this. So that's a good sort of indicator. But there is something that's really interesting that we can take out of this. And if we go to power here, I should mention, by the way, this is a little program called Golden Cheetah, which you can is free to get. You can download it and you can use it to analyze your power files. Here we've got an indication of how much time I spent in each of my power zones. Now we've got zone 7, zone 6, zone 5. I don't think I've got this actually set correctly, and the reason I think that is because here, just here, we can see a sudden drop off on the amount of time that I spent in the power zones. Now what that indicates 9 times out of 10 is that my maximum sustainable power is somewhere around here. In a cycling context, this is what we call our FTP. So the last
level of power that I spent any decent amount of time at was 258 watts. Okay, and below that, I don't really spend any amount of time at a higher power. Okay, apart from the occasional odd spike. So, what that says, this is a really good example of what I call passive testing. And it's an example that you don't necessarily have to go out and do loads and loads of testing and loads of checking in order to still find out some really interesting information. All I've done is switched on my power meter for the warm-up, and I've been able to estimate my FTP. It's not as exact as doing a test, but I can tell from this that my FTP is probably somewhere around 255 watts. So that's the amount of power I could sustain for an hour. And that's really handy because it cuts down on the amount of time you have to spend testing, and it enables you to track stuff like this really quite reliably without having to do a test every couple of weeks. You can just load up your files from your sessions and you can say, where does the power suddenly start to drop? And if that happens one week at a slightly higher value, then you can tell that your performance is probably improved. So just a little look there at an endurance warm-up, which has actually shown us a really unexpected but really useful piece of information. And if I didn't have my power meter on, I never would have been able to find that out. Okay, hopefully you've got something out of that, and if you would like to know a little bit more about it, if you've got any other questions, ask me in the comments and I'll do my best to address them in future. Bye for now, everyone.